All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch, good break. We're in a big room. Everybody's spread out, so we'll try to do the best that we can do today. We're going to talk a little bit about staffing, and I know that we talked before about trying to take care of our own mental health, our own burnout. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about, we have to act as if we've already done all the things that I talked about this morning, and you have energy. So some of the things that are going to be things that are like aspirational, all right? But put them in the back of your mind for when you know, things that you might be able to do, and scale it to things that you could start with, all right? And we'll work from there. So looking at some of the stats, this is from Health Affairs 2021. There's a 94% turnover rate, which is high. That means within a year, 94. Oh, I'm getting to be a pro at that. Okay, hopefully I won't be too much more pro. Okay, but if you look at the 1-star facilities versus the 5-star facilities, the difference is huge. Right, so your staff know when they're in a 1-star facility, and the fact that your staff are leaving are contributing to it being a 1-star facility. And the amount of money this is not just in healthcare. The amount of money that we spend for turnover is 33 to 40% of a worker's salary. So we are spending so much money just on recruiting and hiring and training, on that piece alone. But when you look at it from a psychological viewpoint, like when I'm on the floors, I don't think there's really any way that you can be providing any quality of care if your staff are leaving, because they don't know the residents. You know, you can't tell that Joe is different today than he was yesterday if you didn't know what Joe was like yesterday or the week before. You know, you can't tell that he's had a change in condition, physical or mental, or that he's starting to get agitated. You just don't know. And you don't know that this person Joe's not going to go to this appointment unless he gets his Wheaties for breakfast, right? Like, those are the kind of details that people who have been around know. And you also don't know who to go to if you have a problem. You could be, you know, if you have new staff people on your team, you have no idea, like, who do I tell? Or is this something that I tell? So, like, any money that you're saying, oh my gosh, the staffing, it's costing so much money, if you invest in your staff, you will be saving in so many other areas. In my book, like, this is, you know, where we need to start. If we have a consistent staff, we're in a much better place. So, okay, this is not like I did big research. This is my Eleanor Barbera research. In order to retain staff, we need them to fall in love with the residents. You have to love the residents. You have to really enjoy that. Otherwise, they're not going to stay. They have to feel like they're part of a team and connected, like they belong. The job needs to fit into their lives. If the job is too difficult and doesn't make allowances for the life that they have, they're not going to stay. But if the job accommodates them, people will stay a lot longer because it works for them for now. We need to offer adequate pay and benefits. How many people went into this field for the money? Okay, not a hand raised. Nobody goes into this for the money, except maybe a few people up in the stratosphere. You don't go into it for the money, but you need to have like enough so that you can survive and keep going. And you have to find the work morally congruent. It has to fit with you, like, I'm a good person, I do a good job, this fits. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So let's start with just identifying some of the basic. You're trying to get people to come to the job. And sometimes there's just practical things that make it hard to take this job. Well, it might be scheduling, it might be transportation. But what do we do to find out what these challenges are? Does anybody do anything in particular to find out how to address the challenges in their, like what's making it hard to recruit people? All right, how many people are having trouble recruiting staff? Raise your hand. Okay. All right, so does anybody, so let's think about what might make it difficult to bring staff in. Some practical things. We might want to ask our current staff, right? Does anybody do any staff surveys? Yeah, and what do you find in the staff surveys? You learn anything interesting? Have you learned anything from your staff surveys?
I think one of the biggest complaints we hear is communication.
Communication. Okay, so the people, like what was mentioning from the previous talk, the people on the ground level are not hearing what's going on up above. Okay, very important. Yeah.
Paying benefits, because we had a lot of people leave because we're in a rural area and they weren't making what the city was making.
Ah, okay.
So,
Paying benefits, absolutely. And some of the things you can do are more easy to change. Paying benefits is harder to change, depending on what level you're at, than communication. We can do something more about communication. Any other things people learning from their surveys?
Teamwork among departments.
Teamwork among departments. Okay, that's a great point. Right? That's an area that's complicated, but you can work on that. That's a thing that can be changed. What about exit interviews? Anybody here do exit interviews? Yes. How about you? Have you learned anything from your exit interviews?
Most of it's just leaving for higher pay.
They're leaving for higher pay. Okay. Or that's what they're telling you.
Yes.
Right. How many people here have done an exit interview themselves? How many people were rigorously honest in their exit interview? So I think when you do your exit interviews, I think it's really important to do exit interviews, and it's also important to read between the lines. And sometimes you get someone that's leaving and they're mad. Those are the people you really want to listen to, right? Because they're so mad, they don't care. They're going to tell you really what's going on. Now, you have to read between the lines, too, because they might be like mad at a specific person, but you can get some really good information from people who are leaving that are angry. So it's worthwhile talking to them. Does anybody here have a suggestion box? Okay, yeah. And how's your suggestion box work?
It's in a quiet hallway where nobody can see you come in, and they just can take the paper that's in there and drop in what their suggestions are. And I told them to be honest, they don't have to put the name, and they said they'd be nice to have ice creams, which is why we got the ice cream.
Oh, okay. So for those of you who might not have heard that, the suggestion box is in an area where it's not really obvious that people are going there and putting something in. And one of the suggestions was to have, why can't we have ice cream? And that's why they had the ice cream event. So that's great, because it's very, I think suggestion boxes are great, even, just to get the tenor of what's going on in the building. But you can really boost the use of that if you actually do the things that people suggest, right? You create like a learned helplessness. If people keep putting things in and nothing happens, then they're like, well, why should I bother? But if they put something in and then something actually changes, it gives people hope, like, I have an impact. I can change things. So that's great. Anybody else use a suggestion box that wants to share? Yeah.
no one put anything in. I had to put a lock on it, but no one.
No one put anything in. All right. So how did you encourage people to use the suggestion box?
They were saying that they didn't feel like they were heard, like the communication issues, and I said, well, if you don't feel that you're heard, put something in. It can be anonymous. Even if you want to go home and type something out so it looks like
Right.
just so that you can't tell the handwriting. I said, feel free to do that. Make it more general. Put in random suggestions, whatever it is. And it started out with one of the CNAs. She was saying that our ice carts were a little rickety, like when they were driving them, and they wanted something that was a little cuter because they keep them on the halls and they're kind of pushing around. So we went and got just cuter ice chests that were like teal, and one of them was a Coca-Cola because one of the halls picked that. So just letting them know they had a voice.
Right.
Letting them feel empowered.
Absolutely, that's great, and that helps with the communication, right? That you want to, the people at the who are doing the direct care, they want to know what they're supposed to do from above, but we also need to have the communication from the direct care to the people in leadership. Excellent. We might want to, do a little sleuthing, put on that, Sherlock Holmes cap. You want to skip the pipe because we're trying to be healthy, but, want to do a Sherlock Holmes thing and try to look at the patterns. Like when are people calling out at certain times of day, on certain units, on certain departments? You can kind of figure certain things out that are going on with your teams if you're paying attention to those patterns. Anybody have a time when they notice something like that? I was once working with this nurse. She was an LPN, and she was very bossy, and negative. And I could just see every time she came on the unit and started talking to the staff, the way that she was talking to the aides, you could just watch their faces. They were like. It was so interesting to me. And so that's the kind of person that you would start to notice people are calling out when there's someone like that on the unit. So that would be an indicator that this person is causing problems. That particular woman, I went to the director of nursing, which is something I rarely would do, but it was just such a negative environment. And I said, she needs more support or training because she's causing problems. But you can start to notice some of these things from looking at the patterns. You could ask your team. Do you have anybody here have a time when they ask their team what's going on and what kind of feedback that they know? Is there a time when people do that? Yeah, let's get a new voice. Yes.
I'm a director of nursing.
Okay.
New to it.
Uh-huh.
I try to be available to my staff, and I'm out on the floor pretty frequently talking with the staff. And so I do actually frequently ask them that, what's going on? Are there any issues? And I have an open door policy. I don't have the suggestion box, but that has been something that's gone through my mind. But I feel like they'll come and kind of vent to me, and I have some employees that are negative and bossy, and so I try to address it with them. But beyond that, the next step, if they can't,
Right.
line up is termination, and I don't really want to do that with staffing shortages if we don't have to. So
Right.
it's kind of a fine line.
It is. But I think some of the things going around and talking to going onto the units and talking with people, asking them, is there anything I should know about? Taking the time to talk to them. Open office hours, within limits. If your office is always open, sometimes it can be hard to get anything done, right? So you have to have a balance. These are my hours, and now I need to go and do my other tasks. And a lot of times, most of the places that I've worked in, if the administrator was on the floor, the director of nursing, something was up, right? Because we never saw them. We never saw them unless something was up. So changing it and being somebody that goes through the unit and asks, how are things going? Is there anything I should be aware of? You can learn an awful lot. And you can just, the thing about being a psychologist is I know I've succeeded when I go onto the unit and the charge nurse looks up and looks back down and I'm just the psychologist, right? Because that's when I can see everything that's going on. If you're the director of nursing and you're never on that floor and, the director of nursing is here, it's you don't see what's really happening if you're never there, right? So it's good to have flies on the wall. Here, the sleepover. Anybody here ever sleep over in their facility? You did. Excellent. What was that like? Yeah. I'm going to need more detail than that, I'm afraid.
Well, we opened a new unit,
Okay.
and I slept over the first night.
Slept over the first night in her new unit. Yes.
And we also slept over during snow. I'm sure other people have,
Uh-huh.
just to help.
Okay. And did you see or learn anything from doing that? Not really. So everything was going the way that you thought.
It's too loud at night. People cannot sleep. I don't know how they get over it. Oh, in our building it is.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And,
So
and lights in the hallways do not dim. So
right. Okay.
That's our
So
other thing.
so yes, it can be very noisy at night. Did like 9 years of every other week articles for McKnight's, but one of them was on sleep hygiene because it was just so loud, and you have residents that are sleeping during the day and no problem on the day shift because all the problems are happening at night, and that's where the team communication comes in, like shift to shift. We need to change that sleep-wake cycle. So I remember reading an article about this, about an administrator that slept over, and he said he learned 2 things from doing this. One was that, if you sit in a wheelchair, so he sat in a he gave himself a diagnosis and was there, and if you sit in the wheelchair for hours and hours, no matter how great your butt is going to hurt. And so he said that everybody needed to have a cushion on their chair unless it was clinically contraindicated. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was that the care was too good. They were waking them up in the middle of the night to give them pills to go to sleep sometimes, right? So then he made a rule for the physicians that they shouldn't be ordering medications that have to be given in the middle of the night, again, unless it was clinically contraindicated. I think it's the Greenhouse Project. They do something called the Sleepover Project. So the Sleepover Project was people in upper level management gave themselves diagnoses and slept overnight in their facilities. And they learned the thing about it was too noisy at night, or that there were carts that were so creaky that made so much noise, or that there were just little things that were causing such problems on the floors, and that they could fix, but they had no idea. So if you're ever inspired to sleep over, write an article about it in McKnight so I can read it. They take articles like that. But anyway, you can learn a huge amount of things that you would not normally see. Oh, and the other thing they did was they saw how hard their teams were working, and they did wind up giving them a raise because they were just I don't know how these people are doing as much as they are. Very interesting. Okay, so, this is where I wanted to do some work. Does anybody, I want to give you some paper, if you need paper. And what I want to do is take a little time to write a little summary of what I'm going to need some help. Thanks. Can you hand some paper out on that side of the room? Thanks. Well, you're Q-Source people. You're probably not going to... Are you going to do the assignment too?
We can hand out.
Oh, okay. Great. All right. You can just let them pass it along. It's fine. So what I want to talk about is what makes our field appealing, right? Because right now, what do we hear about? We hear long-term care is awful. Nobody wants to work in the business. All sorts of negative things. Does anybody need a pen? Okay, if you need a pen, I have some up here. Yeah? Okay. So let's take a moment to identify, write down, what's the appeal of the field? Sure. Take a moment, write down what makes long-term care great. Why would people want to be in long-term care? I see some people are writing lots of things, and some people are like, huh. So let me ask you, let's see, who wrote some stuff down? Let's hear, what makes long-term care great? Yes?
You become their family and they become yours.
Nice. Excellent. What else do we have?
You have the ability to grow. So you start out as a CNA, there's chances you can become a nurse, you can grow in the field and learn other areas.
Right, grow within the field, get educated, increase your salary. Yes?
With a positive impact on a population that is in need of love and compassion.
Ah, beautiful. Yes, people that don't often get served, you can really make a big difference. Anything else?
How about the grandparent effect? I've got a son that just lost their families young, and they've adopted their residents, literally.
Yeah, the staff have adopted the residents. And sometimes the residents adopt the staff.
And they fill the void.
Yeah, absolutely. You can make amazing connections. Okay. All right. So what's special about your facility? Take a moment, write down what is special about the place that you work. The population, the staff, the community, the calling, what makes it special? All right, so let's hear what makes your place special. Who wants to share something about where they work? Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's our employees. I have people there that's been there 20 and 30 years, so it shows that they really care and love the residents, and they are like a part of their family now.
So long-term 20, 30-year employees as a real family feel. Okay. What else?
So we're in an urban area on a major street, so easy to get to, buses, transportation.
Okay. That's important, right? People want to be able to go see their family members. It's easy to get to them. The location is good. Yeah.
We're a small, private-owned facility, and it's like more like a family-like atmosphere.
Small, private-owned, family-like atmosphere. Right. So some people want like a big place where there's a lot going on. Some people want a more comfortable, cozy kind of environment. The families run the facility.
The administrator and the business office manager and the business payroll person, they're all family.
Ah, okay. So everybody really is very involved. It's their life. Yeah, cool. Anything else that makes your facility special that you want to share?
We have a very diverse staff.
Ah,
From all different ethnicities, cultures.
yeah, it's exciting, right? Yeah, I work in all over New York City. Super, super diverse staff, the residents. It's amazing. And I get to, as a psychologist, I can be so nosy. It's led to some. I remember one time I was working with this woman from Guyana, and a resident from Guyana, and she was a hoarder, and so I was trying to help her declutter, and she had bread. She had like bread in her room, and I was going to throw it out, and she goes, "No, you have to wet the bread before you throw it out." And I was like, okay, because look, whatever got her to throw it out, I would do it. So then I did that. I wet the bread and I threw it in the garbage. Then I went out to the nurse, who's Guyanese, and I said, "Is that a thing?" And you know what she said? "Yes, it's a thing." It's a thing. Like it was like a kind of like an old wives' tale or something. So who knew? But it was diverse. It was cool. Okay, so now the field, the facility. What about the position? What position are you trying to fill? Let's say probably you're looking for a lot of nurses and aides, right? What makes it, so pick one of those positions. What makes it so great to be in your facility, in this field, to be a nurse, an aide, or whatever position you're looking for?
One of the feedbacks that we got back on our employee surveys was they were pretty strict on the 12-hour shifts. Strict, they wouldn't waive off of that. But then once they got some feedback, and so now we are able to kind of divert a little bit, be a little bit more flexible with trying to recruit. You still got to have your 24/7 covered, but they've allowed us to be a little bit more flexible with that. So I've been able to recruit and get a lot more staff just from that one aspect alone.
Absolutely.
They don't have to work a 12-hour shift.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, so feedback from the surveys and conversations, the flexibility with the scheduling makes a huge difference. And yeah, that's great. That's great. So people are writing about what makes their position good. Any comments on that? Yes.
Most of my management team is nursing, and most of them started off as CNAs.
Oh.
So their growth, those kinds of things.
So the growth of the position. That's wonderful. And to know that your staff have moved up, like they know what a CNA does and what's involved, and they've modeled it. Great. Anybody else have something they want to share about what makes a specific position good? All right, well, it's something to think about, right? You're trying to get people to take positions. We have to be able to know, like, why is this a great position? If we don't think it's great, we need to try to make it better. So here's the next thing. What's your slogan? Right? I think we need to rebrand nursing home work. And I always think about when I was growing up, and the slogan for the Army, and I don't know if it still is the same one, but it's be all you can be, join the Army, right? And I always thought that was so interesting because they could have gone with something much different, you know? It could have been like a steady job with good benefits, join the Army. Or, you know, whatever, it could, travel, or we will tell you what you need to do next, or, you know, like it could have been a lot of things, but they went with be all you can be. So, now this is where you have to have some fun, all right? Have some fun, wear your crazy disco hat, put on your colorful shoes, come up with a slogan. What's your slogan for your place, for your job? So take a moment, write a slogan. You can talk, giggle amongst yourselves as you're coming up with something that makes you think. We got to rebrand. All right. So I'm hearing some laughter. That's good. That's good. Who's got a slogan they want to share? Not you?
No, I was hoping to hear one that I could steal.
It's so good. You don't want it to share it with anybody. Okay. Anybody have a slogan? Oh, yes.
Slogan, but we always say when we count our blessings, we count you twice, whether it be
Oh.
years or whether it be a resident's family, somebody from the community. Come on, y'all, we're family, let's go.
Okay, I like that. We're family. Let's go. When we count our blessings, we count you twice. When we count our blessings, we count you twice. Okay, so that tells everybody that you're going to be in a place where you're really valued, right? Oh, I like that. Anybody else have a slogan? We've got shy people. Okay, thank you. Be the change you want to see. Absolutely, right? That's very empowering. It's like you can come here and you can make a difference. Making connections. I like that. Absolutely. Like that's what you want to be telling them, that about the great things about long-term care. Because if you're not going to be doing those things, you can get a job pays the same or more at McDonald's or whatever. But what makes it special to be in long-term care? Because it's amazing. Like when it's good, it's so awesome, right? And it could be so much more awesome. Okay, so who are your potential employees? High school students? How many people try to recruit from high schools? One person? Two? Okay. What about retirees? Ah, excellent. Okay. There's a thought, right? I see, retirees, right? With inflation, those retirees need some jobs, right? They need to get something else going. A lot of them are still quite able, and they understand the older generation. There's a thought. Immigrants, is there an immigrant population around here? Yeah? Okay. So that might be another group. Often, how about connections of current employees? Is that like a main go-to? Right. Okay, so that's like exploring, keeping those connections going, so that's good. But we also might want to consider some other groups. People re-entering the workforce, like maybe a mom was home with the kids, wants to get some sort of work, have a bridge. Maybe they need, sometimes it might be hard to get a job if you don't have experience, but if you start here, then you've gotten work experience, team experience, and you can move on from there. Somebody tired of their career wants to go to school. They could work for you for a while at least, right? Until they fall in love with the residents. And how are you reaching the people? What are you doing to reach your recruits? What do you do? I'm not in recruiting. What do you guys do? Newspaper? Radio station? Indeed. Social media? Like where in social media? LinkedIn? Okay. So if you were going to try to reach high school students, what would you do? What's that? Facebook, Snapchat, right? Right? Sure. You might go, yeah?
We have a partnership with CNA classes in the high school, so they do their clinicals at our facility.
Okay, partnership, right. You're offering great opportunities, right? You want to get them in when they're young and idealistic, right? And you want to get them to fall in love with your residents. But if you're looking for retirees, you're going to look in a totally different space. They're not going to be on Snapchat, I doubt, maybe Facebook, You might look in different arenas. Maybe you could talk to people in a church or, other places where there might be older people and try to bring them in. So just something to think about. And always, always, always hire for attitude, train for skills. I know it's an adage, but, if you bring in somebody like that nurse that makes all the other aides be like, it's not worth it. You want people that are upbeat and energetic, that are keeping your team up. All right, let us move on. Okay, so onboarding. So how many people here had some sort of onboarding process when they started their job? Okay, and what did it consist of? Not that much? Well, because I remember, I don't know, as a psychologist, I'm not officially on staff, but, I get a bunch of papers to sign, not really to read. Nobody checked that I read them. I just signed them. And then I would go and I would talk maybe to an administrator or maybe the director of nursing, maybe the director of social service, and then that was it. And then I was in. right? So I think we need to do a lot more when we're trying to bring people in. We want to keep them engaged in the whole process, because that's where we lose people the most in the first year, right? But we don't want to lose them before they started. So if you get a lead, you want to follow up as quickly as possible, right? Someone thinks they might be interested, call them right away, get them on, get the things moving, because otherwise they're going to go to somebody else. You want to try to engage before the start date. So let's say they're going to come in, but they're going to come in and start in 2 weeks. What might you do to help them feel like you're welcoming them to your facility? Anybody do anything to help new people before they even start?
At our convention recently at THCA, I heard a group saying that they text them, like just a welcome.
Text them a welcome.
We're excited that you're going to be joining us.
Well, look at that. Text them, welcome, we're excited that you're going to be joining us. How low cost, low effort, and yet a way of drawing them in and saying, we care about you, we're going to count you as a blessing twice, and you're part of our family, right? Brilliant. It doesn't have to be anything huge. It's just like you want to keep them connected and show them that this is going to be different than working in a commercial job. First days. Anybody remember their first days in the nursing home? We're laughing. Okay, why are you laughing?
My very first day in a nursing home, I'd come from the hospital, and it was in 1996 when we still did MDSs on paper and mailed them in, and they handed me an envelope full of MDSs and said, here, fill these out and get them sent in.
Welcome to paperwork. Right. Anybody else remember their first day? I remember once I was being taken around to work on, they had like these psychiatric units within the nursing home. And so I'm on the unit and talking with the director of social service and the social worker for the unit, and there were all these like buzzers and bells going off, and there was some guy that was like rooting around in the trash can, and I just saw the director of nursing looking at me like, I hope she's going to stick around, because it's a cacophony, right? You think, like, if you don't know, this is what I always say to the residents, and to think they used to call these places rest homes. They're not quiet at all. There's no rest. It's very noisy. So I think once you've been around for a long time, you get so used to it, it's normal. But we need to think about what it might be like for somebody to come in new and to check in with them in the first days when they're likely to flee in fear. Right? So it doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be big. It could just be like, come see me a few minutes before the end of your shift, or check with the nurse on the unit before you go, or it could be something just to touch base. And then we might want to do regular check-ins with people. Once I was working in a nursing home, and they asked me to supervise one of the social workers for her a license, and she would come and talk to me, and she would almost always be in tears. Almost always be in tears because she was so upset about what was going on. But the interesting thing was, when I talked to the director of social service, they found her to be so angry and hostile, right? Because she was showing them, she was trying to be tough with them, but with me, she was able to be like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, right? So you want to give them a place that they can say, oh my gosh, this is so hard, because it really is hard work, really hard work. So you want to check in with them regularly, especially in the beginning. And we want to prepare our new staff. So we need way more education, even at the CNA level. And what kinds of things, like just the soft skills, depending on who you're bringing in. You're bringing in high school students, they need to know certain things. So my daughter is now 15, and she worked at a restaurant. She actually did it as a volunteer for a few weeks. She worked at a restaurant down the block. And so I told her, these were the soft skills I gave her. I said, show up on time, and ask if there's anything else you can do. And that was it. Like, that was enough. I didn't ask her to, like, speak up, and that's not her, But if I knew if she showed up on time and asked if there was anything else she could do, she'd be a big hit. Like, sometimes those are the kind of skills that you need. But if your staff are retirees, they don't need those skills. They might need some direction, like you can't sit and talk with somebody for a half an hour because there's other people. Like, that might be the soft skills that they need, right? Because they could talk for a long time about all the fascinating things that they relate about. We want to talk more about teamwork. How many people here worked on teams in a team setting before they came into long-term care? A few, but not that many. It's really different, isn't it? A team is like a whole other thing. And so sometimes the teamwork is like knowing what other people do, right? What's the difference between PT and OT? What does this doctor do? What do people do? They don't know. And they also might not know some basic things, like about a specific team. Like, for example, maybe your team, maybe the aides, if somebody is on break, the rule of your team is you cover for the person that's on break if someone needs to use the bathroom. But maybe the rule of your team is you ask the resident to wait until the person gets back from break. Like, those are like basic, like, how does my team work? We need to tell them because they don't really know. Or who do I talk to? Like, here's one. Resident has no clothes. Who do you tell? Well, first of all, if the resident has no clothes, you should tell somebody, right? A lot of them don't know these things. And that's when you're getting into these conflicts between departments. It's like, oh, should I be telling the social worker? Should I be telling the nurse? Like, who? Like, those are basic pieces of information. And you can get that by, like, hearing what kind of conflicts you're having among your team. If you hear of a conflict or a problem, just know that if one thing gets to you, there's other things that are going around similarly. If a resident is complaining, the curtain between the two beds is dirty, all the curtains between the beds need to be checked, because if that one's dirty, chances are they're not being cleaned regularly. Like, that's your clue. There's other things going on. Okay. Understanding the whole system. What are we doing here? What kind of residents are we taking in? When do we send people back to the hospital? How do people get back home again? Like, big systems things. These are helpful things that people to know as they're starting. Just an overview. It doesn't have to take all that long, but these are things that would be helpful. And then knowledge of how to work with types of residents and families. Does anybody here have an unusual population in some way? Oh, did you hear I just dropped a pin. So I've worked in places where we had a lot of younger residents, and maybe like 25% of the residents had multiple sclerosis. If you have a group like that, you need to tell your staff, what is multiple sclerosis? What does it work? The rooms need to be cooler. There's certain things they need to know. Who here has any psychiatric patients in there, people with psychiatric diagnoses? Raise your hand if you have somebody with psychiatric diagnoses. Okay. How many people have trained their staff on what psychiatric diagnoses are? Okay. Go back. Train. They don't know. It's scary. It's scary when you don't know. When I worked with this resident. She was paranoid schizophrenic, but they had her on the dementia unit because, it kind of looked like if you don't know what paranoid schizophrenia is, it looks like she might be, have dementia. But she knew everything that was going on, of course, because she didn't have dementia. All right. let's move on. Oh, and the families. Yeah, families are super challenging. So this is where, you can do your, bring your psychologist in, or maybe if you don't have a psychologist, your social work director to help them with the families, dealing with the families. You could do, like I talked about behavioral rounds with the residents, you might want to do it with the families too, right? You have a difficult family, get everybody together, gather your information, and figure out a strategy. Oh, okay, so this is a big one. Got to check my time. So much to say. All right, I'm going to keep going fast. All right, so this one, this is a big thing that I don't think we talk about nearly enough in long-term care, which is loss. How many people here remember the first patient that died when they were working in the nursing home? Okay, quite a few. So there's this thing about being aware of death, right? This is we're going to lose people in the nursing home. It's what happens. They're old, they're ill, we're going to lose them. So some people react by withdrawing, and they might leave. They might come in late. They might have like what they call a hot reaction. And some people have more of a death reflection. This is part of life, and this is how I can understand this. And we want to try to move people from this death anxiety to death reflection. How do we do this? Well, younger workers are more likely to experience death anxiety, and your aides, a lot of them are younger. You're trying to bring in new people, right? So they're going to be anxious about all of this. So how do we get them there? So it depends if they think of the job as a calling or career, or if they think of it as just a job. So you might want to tell them, anybody in advance, when you're training them, just so you know, people do die in this environment, and it might be upsetting, and you might feel like a reaction to it, and then you should talk to somebody. You might have a mentor for them if you're feeling upset, or you might have your mentor if they're an aide working with a person who just died, they might have the mentor check in with them, right? We should be paying much more attention to this piece of it. We might want to give them resources like the EAP program, or some grief group, or maybe that Wednesday meditation and prayer. We might send them over to the thing that you have. We might have some ways to acknowledge death. And you might want to offer a bonus. Hang on. Offer a bonus after about 6 months, because I figure you don't really feel like you work anywhere until you've been there for 6 months, right? Like that's kind of like my ballpark figure. But if you can get people to stay for 6 months, they're hanging on, not because they're trying to get to death awareness or death reflection. You're trying to get them they're staying for the bonus. But what happens is they get used to it. They've fallen in love with your residents, and they've made it over the hump. You've helped them. You've given them mentors and resources. And so now they can handle that part of things. It's not so strange to them. Okay. So, who has anybody here worked recently as on direct care? So we got a lot of people in the more upper levels. All right. So I've worked direct care the whole time I've been doing direct care. So what happens is somebody comes in new, and the team is already burnt out, and they're like, oh, somebody's new, and they don't welcome the new person, and then the new person leaves, and then they're like, of course they left, right? And then they're like, well, why should I bother saying hello to this new person? Right? You're laughing. You've seen it happen. It's just and I've gotten there too. It's like, well, I'm just going to wait and see if they stick around before I bother introducing myself or finding out anything about them. Well, what have we just done? We've just set it up. We're not making them part of the team. And so what we really want to do is to have a welcoming team, right? That encourages the new people, and they're supported in encouraging the new people, and then the person stays, and then people feel good. The people come and join us, and they stay. And I've talked to so many nurses who'd be like, oh, I just spent hours training 3 new people and none of them stayed, right? So we need to, when we have ourselves taking care of ourselves and have the energy to do it, we need to support the staff in incorporating these new folks. So you might want to prepare your old staff members, the people who've been around, and say, heads up, somebody new is coming. I can't even tell you how many times I'm walking down the hall and there's somebody at the medicine cart handing out medicine. And I'm like, who is that? What happened to that other person, right? So you might want to just give them a heads up. You might want to provide formal introductions, like basic stuff, so that people aren't just showing up. You might want to have a staff buddy or even a peer mentoring program. Anybody here have a peer mentoring program? Ah. Anybody over on this side? Yeah? How does that work? How are you finding that? Notice anything different before or after?
There's bonuses attached to hours, so it's pretty successful, I think.
Okay, bonuses attached to hours, successful, yeah. Because I think that's really key, right? If we're trying to get people to connect, you want to give them somebody to connect to, and it gives the staff another level, because otherwise CNA level, you could do that CNA job for your whole life. And you can learn so much, but you want to be acknowledged for all that you've learned and transmit that knowledge. So you want to give them another level, give them a career ladder. So how would we support the team in training new people? What do they have here? It's a mystery. Okay. I know what I was going to say. So supporting the team for training new people. What could you do to support the team? The nurse that's putting in extra time training somebody. What could you do? Do what?
They get additional compensation per hour.
Okay. Extra money for training. Is that what you were saying over here?
I said just make sure they have the tools that they need.
Make sure they have the tools that they need to make it easier for them. Yeah. You could also give them cookies.
Sometimes we buy them lunch.
Buy them lunch. You could go by and you could say, you did a good job training so-and-so. We really appreciate it. Right? There's a lot of things that you could do to encourage them and acknowledge their efforts. And how could we integrate the new workers? Well, you could have a getting to know you lunch. A team meeting. Team meetings, you could introduce them, say a little bit about them, that kind of thing. At the change of shift report, you could, it could be like, hey, this is so-and-so, and introduce them around. Because a lot of times people are just like there, right? So we want to change that. And you could do that by having, see, this is where I get creative. You could have a name tag, right? Sometimes it's like, you go up to somebody and you're like, oh, Kimberly, hi, welcome, right? But what if you had a giant name tag with Kimberly really big in bright colors, right? And then your team could go up and they could be like, Kimberly, 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 hey, And when you feel better, you'd feel better. And they could do that for a month, right? You could just have it for a month and then, just to help them feel welcome, right? How many people are going to do that? How many people might consider doing it? Okay.
Do residents or families ever feel like, oh gosh, I don't want the new person?
Well, they're going to get the new, you mean to hide that there's a new person? Oh, hiding the new person?
I don't know. I just
Oh,
think that
maybe.
sometimes they
Well,
have a reaction to that.
They might. Right, they might. That would be interesting. So you could try it and see what happens.
I like it. I just wondered. I could see some people saying, "Oh, don't give me that."
It's possible. But so if your old people are all burnt out, they might want the enthusiastic new person. Right. Higher class of 22. Okay, so here's the thing. So this is like a psychological thing. But if you're short-staffed, and then you just kind of bring in, what's stopped and I didn't do anything. If you bring in like 1 or 2 people into your short staff unit and you're still short staffed, they will go, wow, this job is really hard. There's not enough people to do this job. I'm going to leave, right? But if you bring in a bunch of people, let's say you bring in the 3 people that you actually need and you staff that unit, then that unit has enough staff, and then they're less likely to leave, and then you staff the next unit and you bring them up. I think that you'll have better success, right, when you have enough people to do the job and you can build on that. Just something to consider. And it also makes it so that we're all new together, right? We're the class of 22. So you're giving them a posse. All right, so staff retention. How am I doing? I don't want to overstay my welcome. Oh, okay. All right. So you want your job to work with your life. So the scheduling thing is huge. And like, let's say you have some retirees and you have some people who can work the morning shift after their kid goes to school, and then they can come back later on in the day. Your retirees might fit in. They want to work during the day. They don't want to be driving at night. So you might be able to split your shifts and be really creative. You want to give them control over scheduling. You might want to have daycare on site. That would make the job so much more manageable. You might want to deal with transportation issues, whether it's something that you do as a facility or you just have on your hub, your intranet, you have like a transportation board. You don't even have to do anything. You could just say, if you need a ride, post it, right? You can work out carpooling. You might want to subsidize education. Depending on what role, you could maybe increase the pay and benefits. And from what I understand, with inflation, you're better off trying to increase the pay because people are really struggling. That will give you a bigger bang for the buck at the moment than the benefits. You want to try to notice and prevent the burnout that we talked about earlier. Oh, and the moral congruence. So it depends what role you're in, how much you can do about this. But I think that most staff we can deal with trying to help people deal with a dysfunctional system, but helping people navigate the dysfunction is manageable. But when it comes to the facility doing things that are not in the best interests, when people feel like they can't do the work that they need to do, or that something is going on that doesn't feel right to them, that's when you're losing that service mentality, and that's when you're going to lose people. For example, I was working in a facility, and I always felt like if there was something going on, like I had gone to the director of social service, and I said, this woman finished her rehab, she's walking around, she doesn't really have anybody else in the community but this other older woman, but she really does not belong here. And I know that facility could have spent down all of her money and just kept her. But the director of social service went and looked at her, and they got her support, and they got her out. And that is moral congruence. Subsequently, the management changed, and they started doing sclerotherapy, which is, I Googled it, it's something to do with like opening the blockages in the veins. And everybody was getting sclerotherapy. And I was like, this is not right. And when the place that you're working for is doing things that don't feel right, that is also when you're going to lose people. So it has to be morally congruent, because that's part of the good part of the job. And as I mentioned, any training that you do of the staff, if you can keep your staff, your training is well worthwhile. I could go into that more, but I will stop there. And I think I have 1 minute for questions. Does anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask me? Okay. Well, what I want to say is that I think it's great that you're all here and you're all invested in trying to learn and to try to keep going. And it's been a super, super challenging time. And so, you know, you all deserve a real pat on the back for coming and showing up and participating. And all the things that I talked about before, really, I know it sounds like a lot of time and effort to take care of yourself, but you really give yourself some time, try to do some things that make you feel better, even if you don't think it's going to work, even if you think it's a waste of time. Just go, well, Dr. Barbera said this is going to help. So just try it and see. It will be like an experiment. So thank you so much.